So I wanted to do something about Mr. Rogers today, and I'm going to, because I think he's one of God's favorite subjects, which is how we treat our neighbors. But I've decided instead to take a brief detour on the way to Mr. Rogers and to build a wall around Judson. I will be using the $2,370,603.79 in our endowment and starting immediately. The reason is that we have a neighborhood emergency. Weekly, we are invaded by immigrants in this building, and of course that has to stop. Even though this building was built for immigrants, this country was built for immigrants. The building was built for immigrants. Anyway, it's got to stop. They're no longer welcome here. I'll be starting on this project tomorrow, first thing, even though it's President's Day. And as one of the 4 people in this congregation who can sign checks, I'm going to fake the rest of your names. Some of you are beginning to wonder if this expenditure was in the 2019 budget, which we passed together in December. It was not. I will also be setting a precedent for the future that whenever you don't do exactly what I want you to do, I will declare emergencies and sign checks. I don't have to do this, of course. I just wanted to. All right, enough. Let's go back to Mr. Rogers, who may even be more important today than he was on Friday. Mr. Rogers, a rich Republican by birth, shows us a way to be a good father. In these days when masculinity is being bashed pretty much everywhere, with the people in the White House not doing much to help that matter, thinking about what makes a good father or a good parent or a good authority figure is a really good thing to do. Mr. Rogers had one big argument, and he made it over and over in his acting, in his team building, in the way he did his TV show. And that argument was that the only response to bad authorities is to become a good authority yourself. The only response to bad parenting is to become a good parent yourself. What is a good parent, according to Mr. Rogers? It's very simple. Good parents protect children. That's what we do. A good parent says, you belong to me. A good parent loves you just the way you are. And it sounds like God's job description to me. How many of you did grow up watching Mr. Rogers or know him? Yeah, good, very good. I didn't, so he's all news to me. An ordained Presbyterian minister, he actually got ordained, Ed, to a TV ministry in 1963. You'd have a hard time getting that through our ordination committee today. What's a TV ministry? To whom are you accountable? What's your congregation? Who writes the checks? Because usually you can't get ordained to a TV ministry because you wouldn't know the people face to face, and how could you be accountable to them? I find it astonishing, especially in this particular week with religious institutions looking about as bad as they ever have, Roman Catholics. I find it fascinating that a religious institution in 1963 did this. And they did. Mr. Rogers' theology is best revealed in his reaction to Superman, the father of the superpowers craze. He was furious that Superman was encouraging children to jump off buildings. He thought it was ridiculous, because what if they started doing that? And so, with his classical quietness, he jumped off 2 steps and fell down. and taught the children that that was just fine to fall down, but you wouldn't want to fall down from much higher because you could really get hurt. He gave tons of graduation speeches, and his classical line, his finish, was always, "Just remember, graduates, you don't have to do anything astonishing with your life." What grace and comfort, what gospel. Rogers also didn't let TV go to his head. How many people can do that? Theologically, again, he thought that parents and other authorities had a really big job. Their job was not just to protect children, but to keep children safe from the obvious, fraudulent manipulations of a successful capitalist culture. He saw it, he taught it, he gave people another ground. Instead, children were to become good neighbors and to show each other how to belong. He was a meditator long before meditation became hip. At one Emmy Award ceremony, he took television to a meditative silence for 60 seconds instead of bragging about how great he was to receive the award. And he said, "Would you please join me in silence for 60 seconds and think about somebody who is really important to you?" Can you imagine 60 seconds quiet on TV? You could have an ad in there. And most people in the audience were in tears as they panned. When white people didn't want black people in their swimming pools, remember that? Mr. Rogers invited the African-American character of Officer Pennington to join his 2 feet with Mr. Rogers' 2 feet in a baby-sized swimming pool. And they sat there and said, "Boy, it's hot today. Isn't it comfortable here?" And then they got out one towel and dried each other's feet. Echoes of anything? He also gave powerful testimony against guns in Congress and showed video of how he didn't want little boys using even fake guns. When little boys used fake guns, they went on to use real guns. And what's good about real guns? If you want to see a master perform before Congress, watch Mr. Rogers talk. He says he's brought a 20-minute talk, but he's going to summarize it. And before he can even stop, the senator in charge of the hearing says, "Maybe you'd like to read the whole thing." Go for it. He hired gay people in his company, and his funeral was picketed. Isn't that great? To live so long that you could do something so interesting that your funeral would be picketed. And the people picketing him said it wasn't because Mr. Rogers was gay, or so they and he said over time, but instead because he hired gay people. So I hereby promise you I will not hire any gay people to build our wall. When the Challenger blew up on national TV, he helped the nation and its children heal. He didn't avoid hard subjects. He took on abortion because he knew everybody was talking about it and he knew children were listening. And he had Lady Evelyn and Daniel sing a duet. And Lady Evelyn says to Daniel, "Did you ever think you were a mistake, Daniel?" And Daniel never says yes or no. He doesn't fall for the platitude. He just keeps wondering, am I a mistake? And he wonders and he wonders. And then they sing a duet about Daniel's doubt. That's good parenting. Don't convince the child. Let the child see your confidence and become convinced. Make of doubt a duet. Susan Stenberg of NPR fame calls Mr. Rogers her go-to man when there was a crisis because he knows how to talk to children. And she summarized that what Mr. Rogers said crisis after crisis to children was this: we parents will take care of you. You belong to us. We won't let you down. Also, find the helpers. How many of you have repeated that since 9/11? Find the helpers. Join them. Be a helper. So what's truly great about Mr. Rogers is that he wasn't always great. He's a little square. Those sweaters. He didn't like unions. He was Republican. He may have come from a big city, but he had small town pictures of neighborhoods. You could imagine feeling, that's a neighborhood? All those little nice houses? Is that a hood or what? Also, Mr. Rogers' overwhelming sense of grace gets close. I don't think it does finally get there, but it gets close to what Dietrich Bonhoeffer calls cheap grace, the kind that lacks accountability. There's just no way that grown-ups can allow the president to violate the Constitution or the bishops to overlook pedophilia and think they're doing something right, or that it even protects children. But we can admit, in the middle of this grace and cheapening of it and grace and its magnificence, we can admit to often being stranded there. When to be kind, when to hold accountable. If some of you figures that out, let me know. We can sing a duet with our doubts about neighborhoods and globes being either too small or too large, we don't know, to hold all of our belongings. So a final word from one of our former Sunday school students, a man named Francis Fukuyama. Tutored in the Judson Sunday School, has a new book. It's called Political Order and Political Decay, From the Industrial Revolution to the Globalization of Democracy. Big fancy words. And it tells us that we are in a great transition. Did anybody know that? Duh. Fukuyama says, what is really missing, but he says it in very fancy language, what is really missing is belonging. We don't know how to belong to each other. We have biased compassion and can only love our own tribe. We don't have unbiased compassion that loves the ones we can't know or don't know personally. We're stranded between neighborhood and globe. We're stranded between tribal ways of belonging and global ways of belonging, and we're freshmen in this class. We're just learning. By belonging, Fukuyama means we don't know how to recognize each other. Because recognition is my seeing me and you seeing me also. Still in all, stranded in all, it will be a beautiful day in the neighborhood and on the globe once we all figure out how to be mine together, or liking you just the way you are, as long as you like me just the way I am. And from there, there'll be a basis of belonging that allows us to do good by our children as authorities, and maybe even do good by immigrants. Amen.